Video podcasts are a great way to create quality content, but there is a lot that goes into producing a show. In this video, I'm going to step you through all the details for recording, editing, distributing, and marketing your podcast. Before we hop in, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, Riverside. Now, I'll get to them in a little more detail later on, but they make it super easy to do everything I'm going to share with you today. So whether you're a beginner or you want to make your workflow more efficient, we'll step through all those details. Let's start with a list of everything that you want to consider and start planning for before you even hit record on your podcast. Now stick with me, this can feel a little daunting, but by the end you'll have all of the pieces that you'll need to get that video podcast out for the world to see. I'm going to break this next part down into phases. Now, phase one is a great place to begin, and then as your podcast evolves, then you can potentially move into phase two. But for phase one, I am going to suggest that you start with a virtual podcast. We're all used to meeting and corresponding virtually these days. So that's just a nice, comfortable spot to start. And then from there, what you want to do is start thinking about your podcast name and your concept. For your podcast name, make sure that you're not naming your podcast the same as somebody else out there might have, that you're not going to violate any copyrights or anything like that, trademarks. So make sure you do a little bit of research before you come up with your podcast name. And then for your concept, what do you want to talk about? What types of questions are you going to ask? How many people are going to be on your podcast? Now, lots of podcasts just have one person, so you could be a solo podcast, but you could have guests or a certain number of people. The second thing is cover art. All podcasts will need cover art, whether you're posting on YouTube or Spotify, or if you have some other way to distribute your video podcast, you will want podcast art. So think about your cover art and what that might look like. And then as your questions evolve and you have a better idea of the items you want to cover, lay out a script of what your episode flow is going to kind of feel like. Now, I like to leave a little room to move around and be a little more casual in the conversation, but it's up to you. If you want a more structured script or flow to your podcast, then definitely outline all of that. How are you going to start your podcast? How are you going to end it? List all your questions. And if you're speaking to a specific guest, what are the questions that you want to ask that person specifically? So write all this down ahead of time. Make sure you're prepped before the conversation, and you'll be feeling really good and confident before you step into your episode. As I mentioned earlier on, I recommend starting with a virtual recording. So let's hop into Riverside and take a look at what that can potentially look like if you're using this tool. I'm about to enter my recording studio here in Riverside. So I have my name. I am going to be the host. I am not using headphones, and I'm going to go ahead and join the studio. Here I am in the studio, and you can see that I can also invite other people. If I want to invite them at the time of recording, I can just send them an invitation out. You can do this ahead of time, but this is what the recording studio looks like. I'm going to go ahead and cross that out, and I'm going to hit record. This is going to give a little countdown, but this is how easy it is to record here in Riverside. Now, what's nice about Riverside is you're going to get high quality video and audio. You're going to get higher quality than other tools that are out there. Probably the tools that you use in your everyday conference calls won't give you as high a quality. So I do suggest that you use Riverside if you want a higher quality show. So as you can see, I'm recording, and when I'm all done, I'm just going to hit stop. And then I'm all set. Now, if I exit out of here, my episode is uploading right here. And then what is great about Riverside, all I have to do is click into this recording, and I can edit my entire episode directly in Riverside. I've done a detailed video about this. I will place a link to that video down in the description, but you can record your show in its entirety. You can create clips, all of this using AI. You can do your transcript. It's going to break everything down into chapters for you. And anyway, there's a ton that Riverside can do to make your editing super easy directly here in the tool. Now that your show is edited, all you do is export it from here, and you're just going to export the video file only. Now, your video file has both your video and audio, and some people will watch your video and other people will tune into your podcast and they just want to hear the audio version only. It doesn't matter. You have everything in one file, so you're all set. There are a couple of different ways to distribute your podcast. The first is YouTube. So it's a video podcast, so you want to make sure that you're posting to YouTube. YouTube does have a podcast designation in the platform, so you want to make sure you have that all set up ahead of time. You have your cover art and all that good stuff. So you upload one file to YouTube, and then I suggest using Spotify for podcasters. Right now, this is a free service. And the reason why I do this is because on Spotify, they also support video. Again, this is a video podcast, so upload that episode to Spotify. And what's great about Spotify is they are a podcast distribution dashboard as well. So from there, you can set up all of your other distribution channels like Apple Podcasts, and you can see the list right here. You do need to set these up ahead of time, but all you do is upload that one video file, and Spotify will distribute both the video and the audio versions of your file to those separate podcast platforms. And then once you fill in all the details for your episode, you can either schedule ahead of time or publish that episode, and then it is automatically distributed. Your podcast is out there, you are posting episodes on a consistent basis, and you're wondering why your viewership isn't going up, or maybe you aren't reaching a larger audience. So something you want to do is market your podcast. You want to tell everybody about the show and what you're talking about and what you're up to. So let's hop back into Riverside. This is the dashboard for a podcast that I personally host. It's called the Actionable Marketer Podcast. Let's hop into my conversation with Sarah. And one way you can market your episode is to create vertical clips that you can share on social media. So the great thing about Riverside is you can generate those clips magically in here. They're called magic clips. Now I've already generated these clips for this particular episode, but once they are generated over here on the right hand side, look at this. We have magic clips. You can open this, add captions, add your branding, do whatever you want, but Riverside makes it super easy to create these vertical clips that you can share it on social media. Now remember, anytime you share out, you want to let people know that they can listen to the full episode and drive them back to wherever you have your full episodes posted. That could be either on YouTube or out on any other channel that people might be listening to their favorite podcast. Those are all the items that you want to have in phase one. Now, another thing I do suggest is to record a handful of episodes ahead of time before you even release your video podcast. That way you have a pool of episodes and you're ahead of the game, and you can continue recording and give yourself a little buffer in case something happens along the way, like life stuff. Now, later on, as your podcast evolves and you get more comfortable recording with other people or with yourself, then phase two gets a little more advanced, but it has the same base concepts. So you might want to do in-person recordings rather than virtual recordings. That's a lot of fun. You can also use Riverside to edit. All you have to do is export those files. You can import them directly into Riverside and take advantage of all of the editing tools that are in Riverside and distribute from there. Some more advanced marketing items that you might want to consider are to create a blog post that supports your podcast episode. So all you do is you embed your video onto that blog post. You can do a complete write-up. You can use AI to do this to help you out along the way. It's great for SEO for your website. Also, if you have a newsletter, or even if you don't have a newsletter, you can distribute or announce that the next podcast episode is out via a newsletter. That requires an email sign up and all those types of things. But again, these are more advanced marketing tips, but it's something you might definitely want to evolve to. And then also, if you want to start generating revenue, another thing you can do is create ads and embed those in your podcast episode. I'm sure you've heard these on some of the podcasts that you listen to on a regular basis, but as things grow, again, these are things to consider and that you can incorporate into your overall workflow. If you didn't believe me at the beginning of this video that creating a podcast is very involved, then you might have a better idea now. But using a tool like Riverside makes things super easy, and what's great about it is it can grow as your workflow grows. So if you want to give Riverside a try, you can do so for free. I'll place a link down in the description, and then if you like what you see, all you have to do is use the code CREE, and you'll get 15% off. I'd like to learn more about your video podcast, whether you already have a podcast or you're going to start a new one. Let me know what the name of it is down in the description. And if you liked what you saw today, leave a thumbs up before you head out. Be sure to subscribe. And thanks as always for tuning in. I'll see you again in the next video.